Hey YouTube, hey viewers, and welcome back to yet another episode of creating our social media API using Laravel. We're getting pretty far in the series. I keep saying that over and over again, but we are. We're getting very far in the series. We've managed to get to a point where we've created this new endpoint route for our user controller to get access to me, but we also created, if you remember, that new model, which was our status update route. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at that again today. We're going to be actually getting the user to create a status update, and we're going to be able to see that in our request that we send off. However, I did make a mistake in the last episode, which we need to rectify straight away. And that is, remember we made that connection between the one-to-many relationships. I made a small mistake when I was declaring those relationships, so we need to fix them right now. So we need to open up both of our models. And remember, on our model, so our status update model, we did this belongs to user. I made this incorrectly. It's not actually user like this. You need to actually refer to the class. So it needs to be user and class, like so, not in the quotations. That was my mistake. And we're going to do the same for the user. So we're going to change that status update to be status update and then class. Oh, my. Basically, that's just referring back to our models, and it's just a little bit more easier if we just refer back to those models in general. Now that's set up, what we can do is we can start working on our endpoint to allow our user to update their statuses. So to do this, we're just going to go into our api.php, and we've got this user controller here. Now, this is entirely up to you. We could create a whole new controller if you want to. I am going to do that. I am actually going to create a whole new controller, and I'm going to show you something cool that we can do with controllers, because don't forget, status updates we're going to be doing a lot with. For example, you can add them, you can edit them, you can change them, and etc. So we're going to run something a little bit nicer when it comes to creating these controllers. I'm going to show you a nice unique feature that we have. So we're going to jump into our console, and I'm in my normal project, so inside my Laravel. And I'm just going to do PHP artisan so we can see the list of commands that we've got. And we've been through this many of times, that there's quite a few variations of things that we can do. However, what we do have here is we've got the make controller here, but I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to show you something. So if we do PHP artisan and make controller, but before I do anything, I'm just going to do -help. And this is going to tell us what we can add on to this make controller. And there's a few things we can do. However, I'm very interested in this one here, which is generating a resource. And we'll see exactly what that does shortly when we write one. So let's just press up, and I'm going to do PHP artisan make controller. And I'm going to make my new controller, which is going to be status updates. And we could put controller at the end, but I don't think so we need to. Have we done that naming convention? I'm not too sure. We have, yeah. So we're going to add controller. Then of it, controller. There we go. And I'm just going to do that -r. So we're saying we're going to make this new controller called status updates. We call it status update controller, and R for this resource. And you'll see what this is going to do shortly. Let's have a look at that new controller we made, this status updates controller. If we click in it, you'll notice it's pre-given us some things that we can use for our API. So remember, we've been writing all these individual ones. Well, this makes it a little bit more easy that we don't have to keep writing them over and over again. We can just use them. So obviously index is everything, and this create we will not be using it. You might get a little bit confused. It's actually store instead of create. Show brings back a specific one, edit obviously changes one, update also changes one, but we're going to look at the difference between them, and obviously destroy. And we'll go through each one of these throughout the series, but in this instance for this tutorial, we're just going to create a status update. So we are going to be looking at this one, store. So in our api.php, we can quite easily make a new route, and this time it's going to be a post. And we're going to call this status update. Actually, we could call a new status update if we want, or I don't know, we can call it whatever you like. We could call update or status like that /new. There you go. That's a little bit more easier. So we're going to have user status new, and we're going to go to the, not the user controller, we're going to go to our new one, which is called the status update controller. So, and the function we're going to just call store, because remember in our status update controller we're going to this function here, which is just, there is something else you can use, and I'm not going to go into it just yet, but there's this thing called resource that you can do with route resource, and that'll do all of them with one name, but we're not going to look at that just yet. That's further on in the series. It's just so we can break it down and I can show you little bit by little bit. So we know this is going to status new, so let's actually have a look at our routes to see if they're working. So PHP artisan route list, and that should now give us our new route list. Oh, that's because I probably have to do, because status update controller does not exist. User dump. This is normally a thing that you have to do to clear caches and stuff. So if you do get that weird message, it's just, you just need to do a refresh on your project. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just, I don't know, it just has a bit of a, just okay. That's finish. Shouldn't be too long, I don't think. Those don't take too long. Okay, that, but you know. Well, whilst waiting for that, don't forget, you can always jump onto my channel, hit that subscribe button. If you want to join our Discord, you can hit that button there. And if you want to join us in a little society, just hit this button here. And obviously, if you like the video, hit that like button. Hopefully, it's now finished. And it's not. Oh, there you go. It's now finished. So, if we try run that artisan route list now, we're still getting the same error for some reason. Is that because I've named this wrong? Oh, I did. Oh, I'm silly. I incorrectly named this. So now if I run the route list, there we go. It's working now. Okay, so we can see now, actually I'm gonna have to zoom out a bit here. So we can see, so now we've got this API user status new, and this is a post request, and we can see it's going to status updates controller and to our store. And it's hidden behind the auth API, which means the user has to be logged in before we can use this route, which is perfect. That makes our life a lot more easier. So we can now go into our little postman here, and in our YouTube series, I'm actually going to make a new folder in our collection. Add a folder. I'm going to call this status updates. And we're going to add, actually we could just probably copy this. So we'll duplicate that register and paste it into there, or just move it in. Rename it, new status, and headers are fine. We're not too bothered about that, and body are all going to change. Take that all out. And obviously the route is different. It's not API register. If we look in our console, it's API status new. So we're going to grab that route. Put it. And if we have to send that now, it's probably going to say we unauthenticate, although I can never say that word, please forgive me. But we can quite easily pass in our authorization, which is our bearer token, and hit send. We get nothing back, which is fine, because if we look in our controller, there's nothing in this store. If I had to put a DD in here, so die, and we call Bob in this case, it should hit that endpoint. So hit send, we get that weird message, and we get Bob back. This is perfect because that's what we want. So what do we need for the status update? Well, we know when we made that table, we have a user ID and a status. Now, these are the only two fields that we're going to need that comes from, actually, we don't even need the user ID because we could pull that. I'm going to show you how to do that. But all we really need from Postman is the status. So let's go into our body, have a field called status. And we're just going to call, I don't know, we can say, hi, I'm going to the zoo today. Actually, you never post status like that. You could just say, I'm going to the zoo today. And basically we're just passing this status to this section. And if we hit send, obviously it's going to still give Bob, but we do know that we sending the correct status. So let's jump into our code. And now this is, remember, we have to do our jiggery pokery. Remember, we make all these services. So this is where our repository pattern comes into play. Because we're doing something different, this is now a new service. So the easiest way to do it is either make a new one, or you can copy your current one, which is the user service. And we're just going to copy the file and just rename this. And we'll just call this status update service. We're going to add that in. We're going to delete everything until the construct, because we know that's what we need for our repository pattern. And we're just going to change this to be status update service. So that's pretty much the service up and running. Now, obviously, we need this repository contract. And remember, to do that, we have these two. So in repository contracts here, we're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to copy the file. And we're just going to call, instead of user repository, it'll be status update repository. Again, what we can do is just remove everything in there. We have an empty class. And we just change the first name here, which is going to be status update repository. This needs to implement into our contract. So that means we need to make sure we have a contract. So we can do the same again, refactor, copy file, and we just change this to be status update repository contract. And we remove everything in there. And we just change the name here. So now we have a flow. So the status update repository is still incorrect because it's looking at the user repository contract. That's not what we want. We want to look at the status update repository contract, and we can get rid of this empty use, or both of these empty users. To be honest, we don't need them. Okay. So that's now working. Our status repository is looking at our contract. Let's double check our status update service. Now we can see there's a few errors here. It's looking at our user repository contract. We do not want that, so we're going to take that out. And we're going to refer to our status update repository contract. And we're going to call it status update repository contract. This is also incorrect, but we can just overwrite this pretty much. We can put our status update repository contract there. And we want to make sure that we're pointing to status update repository contract. Make sure that you take out the $. You don't want to keep that. And also we want to make sure that our protected is looking at status update. We can get rid of this stuff here because we don't need it because it's empty. The only thing we need is the status update repository contract. So that's perfect. And now the last thing we need to check is our status update. Oh, sorry, our controller, status update controller. All we need to do is add into our controller, remember, another construct. And as you know, we're going to be looking at our status update service. So I'm going to call it status update service. Because remember, that's where all our business logic lies. And we're going to go to this, copy this because I'm lazy, and just take out the $, is equal to then the status update service. And obviously we just need to make sure it's a protected variable, like so. Okay, now we're pretty much up and running, and that's the repository contract. Remember, if you're still a bit confused about repository contracts, I have got a video a few episodes beforehand, so if you want to check that out, do so. But really, it's dead simple. If you've done it once, you can copy it over and over again. Just make sure you get rid of all the jargon in between. We can get rid of that. Now we have that, we can start doing some work. So now we've got this status update service. That's quite easy because we can call this new status is equal to this status update service. And we're going to be calling a function called, I don't know, new status, like so. Now we don't have that obviously because it doesn't exist, but we're going to pass in request all into here. Now remember, this is not the best way to do it. You should be making your own requests, and we will fix this up again, as I say, when we've got a bit of time to tidy up code. You will make your own requests like we did with the register user controller and the test one that we did a few episodes ago. So you want to make your own. And basically, we're just going to copy this and we're going to pop into our status update service. And we're going to call a new public function. Call it new status. Obviously, it's not going to be request all data. It's just going to be called data. And remember, it's type of array. That's what we're passing into it. Now that we're here, we don't really need to do much logic because, well, actually we do, because we need the user ID. So we could grab our user ID. So $user ID. And remember, a while ago, we used this auth user, and we can call ID. And this is the cool thing about using Laravel. So if I'm currently logged in, I can use this auth user. So this will always return me back the user that's logged in and also their ID number. So now I've got reference to the ID. And what I could do now is I could call a new data and make an array of data. And we can make it very similar to what it looks like inside here, user ID and status. So let's give that a go. User underscore ID is equal to user ID. It's not really equal to that, but that's how I think of it in my head. And also the next one we want to have is status. So status, and it's going to be data. Now remember, not one of these, it's actually an array. So we need to get the value out, and it's status. Off. And what we can do now is we can send this off to our repository, because remember that does all the database transactions, and we'll send it off there. So we go $this, our status update repository contract, status contract, and it's going to be a new status close, and we're going to pass in this new data. So obviously this doesn't exist, but we can quite easily make that if we jump into our repository contract. And remember, it's just public function. Paste that in. Now remember, this is type of array. Make sure that you're passing in an array. And we need to now update the repository, because remember, it's not going to work. It's going to say that, well, you've declared this inside the contract, but it's not actually in the repository. So let's do that. Now, normally it'll just tell us what we can do straight away in PHP Storm. If you don't, then basically it's just public function, new status, array of new data. And all we're going to do now is just add it in. Now we've got the model, so it's dead easy. We just call $new status. Actually, we're going to wrap this around a try catch. Try catch and backslash exception $e. Oops, not $e, $e. And so basically the try catch is going to make sure that if I get any errors, we can see what the error will be. So on the try, we're going to have $new status. This all becomes very repetitive, and it'll make sense the more you do it. And it's going to be a new status update. Don't forget you're referring to the model. And remember, we use that cool thing called fill. So we can fill, and we're going to fill in the new data. And then all we're going to do is we're going to say save on this. So we're going to save the data. So, and all we're going to do then is just return back the new status, like so. If we have a problem, so for example, this doesn't work, we're just going to return back $e. Actually, E and get message. That message is. Okay. So our repository is now taking care of anything that we're adding in. So in this case, we're making a new status update. We're going to put in that data and we're going to save it. We're going to return it back to our service. So this will come back with a result. So we can say return this. Okay. Return that back. We now go back into our controller. Sorry, I went the wrong way. So we go back into our controller, which is this new status. And remember, all we do then is we write return response, and it's a JSON response. So, and we put in an array inside there. Brackets. There we go. So inside there, we have data. Inside data, we have another array. And now in next session, I think we will be creating a helper to do this, so we don't have to keep writing the same thing over and over again. But inside the data, we have a success. Case will be true. It might not always be because we haven't put anything in place to say if it's not. message, and we can say status updated. And then what we can do is we have data, and the data is going to be the new status here, like so. And close that off. So technically what we're doing now is we're just storing some data inside our new status. And basically we should get a response back with our new status that we get back from the database. So hopefully with everything working, it should work. So let's hit send. We get an error message. Okay, this is because we haven't bind the repository contracts together. So remember to do that. We go into our repository service provider and we just bind it. So we can duplicate this line, so copy and paste it. And it's not the user repository contract we want, it's the status update repository contract and the status update repository. So, and just up because I don't like all over the place. Now, if we run that, hopefully it should work. And there we go. So it says true status update. Oh, hold on. We've actually got an error message here. And that's where that try catch comes into play. And that's why it's quite handy whilst we're working. Is it says add user ID to fillable property to allow mass assignments. Okay, so basically it's saying in our model, this is not fillable. So we can't add that in. So it's quite easy to fix this. We can go back into our code base. So back into our PHP store. And we're going to go into our status update model. And in here, all we need to do in here is type in protected fillable equals an array. Now fillable is basically saying what fields can, you know, when I use that fill method, what can I fill in? So it's just making it a little more tight so you can't just fill everything inside the database. You have to be specific of what you'd like to fill. So in this case, I just want to have user ID as well to be filled. Okay. Pretty straightforward. So let's give that a go. Let's hit send again. And field status doesn't have a default value. Insert in status updates, user ID. Maybe I need to have status in the fillable state too. So we can just put a comma and we'll put status in here. Status. Send. And there we go. So that's working now. So we can see that we've got a success message. The message says we've been updated and now the data is now gone in. So because we're using that fillable property, we need to make sure user ID and status was in there. Created that and updated that and created that was not an issue. We didn't need to really worry about that. So it's not much of a problem for us. So now if we go in the database and have a look as well, if we refresh on status updates, we now got this status here. That's pretty cool, right? Okay. Now, let's say, for example, actually, I think we're kind of running out of time. So I'm going to leave this episode here. And in the next one, I'm going to show you how we can attach this information onto our user. And it's pretty cool how we can do it. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to, I'm just going to save this endpoint, but if I went into get me, so this was that endpoint we created, and send, you'll notice we had this data here, which was my name and email and stuff. What I'm going to show you is that when we pull back that user, we're going to add the information that's within this table as well. So the status update table. Maybe if you want to try that as a bit of homework for yourself, I mean, go ahead because you got the relationships, and maybe just show me the results in our Discord channel and see if you managed to do it. If you did, that's great. And you can probably skip the next episode, I guess, but we'll look at doing that. If you manage to do it or not. And we're also going to look at creating that nice response helper so we don't have to keep repeating ourselves over and over again with writing this over and over again. So I hope you really enjoyed that session. Again, it was a bit of a long one. I'm sorry about that, but I hope you really liked it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. If you like it, then obviously hit the subscribe button. If you really, really like it, then don't forget to share with your friends. Again, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.